When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Cersei, and the main point of today's video is really going to be focusing on, is Cersei a smart character, or is she dumb? Or is there some middle ground there where she's a little bit of both? And in this video, we're going to have to go through a lot, because we have to understand what her motivations are, everything in her context, and then applying that to the actual world, and do her decisions make sense? And especially we're going to look at her big moments. Like, for instance, her quote-unquote beating Ned at the Game of Thrones. We're going to dissect that a little bit, and we're going to talk about how much of that was responsible on Cersei, or was that more of other factors or luck and stuff like that. We're going to talk about other situations when it comes to, okay, Cersei's in her own power in Feast for Crows. How does she manage that power? What decisions hurt her? And kind of prompt her to make awful decisions. So, another thing I want to preference. Cersei reminds me a lot of Catelyn Stark. Because Catelyn is this character where she can be very smart when she is put in an element that doesn't really impact her too much, and she's in a very low emotional state. When we look at Catelyn with, say, characters like Renly and Stannis, she is kind of our voice of reason, our insight into reason that the two should make peace. Now, Catelyn doesn't really understand that that's never going to happen between the two. Pretty much impossible. But she is kind of the voice of reason, and kind of us as the readers sitting here going, no, Stannis, Renly, stop fighting each other, join each other, beat the Lannisters. And Catelyn and Cersei share a very distinct similarity that when the emotions get higher and they feel at the most in danger, they continuously make bad decisions. Or, for instance, people in their family are in danger, they make bad decisions. Cersei is someone that has a lot of plots that don't make any sense. But when you look at the context of the information she knows, they can make sense in her mind. Or for her, what her motives are, they can make sense. Before we get further into the video, I did want to say, this will be the last time I'm going to plug my new channel on this channel anyway. But if you wanted to subscribe to my second channel, it's going to be a lot of Lord of the Rings and secondary content to what I'm reading. I have mentioned The Witcher, the Percy Jackson series, maybe Harry Potter in there as well. Just other things that I am currently reading that I want to talk about on that channel. So that's going to be like a secondary channel that's not a Song of Ice and Fire stuff. Check that out if you want to see that. And also, if you want to subscribe and like on this channel, you should. We talk about Song of Ice and Fire all the time. And this is kind of one of those character analyses I like to do. So, Cersei from a young age is basically taught, because here's the big important thing, is that Joanna, her mother, gets taken from Cersei and the Lannisters very, very young. And that deeply impacts the entire family, because Joanna seemed like she was a little bit more involved in their lives, where Tywin seems very neglectful, really only caring about his legacy and these children not screwing it up, which, funny enough, they are the ones that screw it up. But Cersei kind of learns from her father on these ideals that they are better than everyone else, right? The idea of the lions over the sheep. And that's not really a great thing to be learning, because we see how Cersei will apply that later on, that she believes she's better than everyone. And another idea that this points to is the idea of Cersei being very narcissistic. And one of the reasons we talk about why Cersei and Jaime get together, from Cersei's point of view, I think it is, one, she has this idea that nobody is really good enough for her, right? Because she is above everyone else that's on a Lannister. And Jaime is also her twin, so it's kind of a reflection of herself, because she herself thinks she's better than everyone. And you also pair this with other things like the prophecy she gets from Maggie and all that's told there. And those are things that early on in her life don't affect her too much. But as time goes on and these prophecies start to come true, with her marrying the king and Robert, and the children prophecy where she'll have 3 and all that, it very much is going to impact her decision making that we see in Feast for Crows. And a lot of this stuff at her childhood deeply affects how she plays the game. And a lot of Cersei's problems and issues she has to overcome, she creates those problems. So I think right off the bat, I think we have to eliminate that she's a genius. That's just not true. She's not on the intellect of Tywin or Tyrion, but I think she's somewhere in the middle. There's always a lot of people, whether that's Tywin, whether it's Tyrion, that say, yeah, Cersei, you're above average intelligence, but you're not as smart as you think you are. And that's the biggest weakness, is we talk about all of these characters like Jon or Tyrion, who kind of start to understand what their weaknesses are and what their ceilings are, what they can't do, and how they will have to go about their lives. Cersei is not like that. Cersei just disregards that completely. She hates that. She thinks that she can do anything and that she is the best. She's the smartest person in the world. And we know that's just not true. She just is not that. And that's something that holds her back. If we look at Cersei's entire conflict that leads to children, presumably are going to die in Winds of Winter outside of Joffrey, who's already died. Jaime, who's going to become this very distant character to her. She's lost the rest of her family. If she had just not slept with Jaime and not had kids with Jaime, whole conflict wouldn't be needed. And it's tragic because Cersei is in this position where she could have been someone like an Alysanne with Jaehaerys. But again, Robert wasn't a good king. But Cersei could have, once Robert died, been in that position. But she's just not that smart. She doesn't care about people. She is, yes, smart and can think through things. And when I'm going to bring up an example. So in book 1, in Bran's chapter where he actually falls, we get this discussion with Cersei and Jaime while they're in the tower about why Ned would actually accept the hand of the king. Because Cersei was under the illusion that there was no way that Ned was going to accept it, which we know is actually true. Ned was not going to accept it until Lysa's message came, and then also Catelyn and Luwin kind of pushed him into it. So it took a lot to get Ned to go south to be hand of the king. So we see that Cersei understands that something is going on. There is some other reason as to why Cersei, or why Ned is coming south. And there's things like that sprinkled throughout the entire story where Cersei understands that there is something going on and that these people are not here for just this reason or another reason. Again, the Tyrells. Cersei is completely right. The Tyrells are trying to gain power and gain more sway. Why do they keep marrying all these people that are going to be king? Renly, Joffrey, Tom, and Marjorie goes through 3 different people that were considered a king because they want power. And Cersei is right to not exactly trust them and not to keep giving them more and more power. But the problem is, and this is what makes her a dumb character, is she doesn't understand how to play the game, I guess. Like, don't be insulting the Tyrells to their face. Don't be this person that obviously is showing that they do not like the Tyrells. Play the game a little bit. You know, put people in power that makes sense and it's just not a clear slight to the Tyrells. Or do what Kevin was trying to do. So Kevin was under this idea that Kevin was going to try and sway some of these Tyrell bannermen to his side, giving them positions of power instead. And that was really smart, but this is not what Cersei does. Cersei is someone that is very untrusting. And like I talked about at the beginning of this video, she is someone that she makes decisions based off of what makes her feel safe, or say her children feel safe. Not what is necessarily going to keep them safe, but what she feels like is going to. And Tyrion notes this. When we look at Tyrion all throughout Clash and his back and forth with Cersei, Tyrion has to drug Cersei because she's just making so many stupid decisions. Like, for instance, the wildfire. Cersei was going to try to presumably shoot this on, like, catapults and stuff like that, which is highly dangerous. It's a really tough thing, and using it not to its full effectiveness to how Tyrion uses it. And Cersei does these things all over the place. Cersei is not really trying to win the war. She's more trying to keep herself safe and sane. And that's what Tyrion even notes in his chapters, is that exact idea. So Tyrion being a much smarter character, because Tyrion goes about how you deal with your enemies in the best possible way. You make them feel like they have power. Like, he makes Cersei feel like she's in control while she isn't really in control. And that's the way Tyrion does it. Cersei doesn't understand how to do that. Cersei kind of sees things as like, it's my way or the highway type thing. And then you got to factor in this prophecy that someone more younger and beautiful is going to take everything she, loves. And she obviously thinks that's Marjorie. Now, I don't blame Cersei for this. Everything's come true up to this point. Marjorie's described as being extremely beautiful. She's young, and she, quote unquote, is trying to kind of sway Tommen / Joffrey away from Cersei's clutches. But I don't blame Cersei going about and having some disdain for Marjorie, but the way she goes about it and does all these things makes no sense. There's all these wars going on right now and rebellions happening. You cannot afford to piss off the Tyrells. And what does she do? She pisses the Tyrells off. She just doesn't understand how to, A, control / have a good relationship with her children, because she does an awful job of that, especially with Joffrey. She doesn't understand that. And if we even go back, let's go back to book 1, where we'll look at maybe her biggest feat of success, is how she handles Ned. Now, even then, I have argued a lot that Ned was not stupid in book 1. Ned did everything right. He could have done some other things that really would have helped, but just because you couldn't have a story if that would have gone that way. Like, Ned, after what happens after, like, I just got done reading Sansa 1 and also Ned 3. That's the whole situation where Joffrey gets attacked by Nymeria, that whole situation. After that happens and Lady is killed, Ned should have gone north. He should have said, fuck this, and leaving. Because Robert obviously is a different person. And seeing the way things are swayed towards the Lannister power, Ned should have understood that and left. But Ned stays, and Ned, even up to the end of it, right, is in a perfect position. Robert was the key. If Robert dies, then Ned is fucked. Ned has very little outcomes where he wins. One of them would have been with Renly. And even then, I mean, that just goes against Ned's code. But still, Cersei doesn't really do much. She wanted to get Robert killed, and she got very lucky that it happened right before Ned finds out. Or I guess Ned tells Robert. And then you just have the idea that you were able to sway the Golden Cloaks over someone like Ned, and because Littlefinger didn't like Ned and saw the chaos that could come from with Ned's, being imprisoned. So again, a lot of that didn't really have a lot to do with Cersei. A lot more had to do with luck. There was just some other thing going on that Cersei and Ned really didn't control. And it just comes down to, okay, Cersei's willing to do those dirty things. And I will say, to Cersei's credit, she does do some things throughout the book that are actually pretty impressive. And one of those is getting rid of the wolves. Like, Cersei does this thing where she understands how to manipulate a character like Robert at times, where the reason that Lady is killed is because Cersei plays on that pride of Robert's, where Robert has this pride. He doesn't like being called a coward, or doesn't like being compared to his younger self as better. And that's exactly what Cersei pokes on to get Lady out of the way as well. Because eliminating 2 direwolves from coming south is big for Cersei. She doesn't want those around with the children, because if something was to happen, like Sansa getting captured because Ned's imprisoned, a direwolf not being there is good. And she does things like that, where she kind of sets herself up in a position to get rid of potential problems. Unfortunately, if she would have just looked at her own life and things she's doing, we'd be in a much more peaceful Westeros right now, but she doesn't do that. And she kind of does these things sprinkled throughout the story where she does make smart political moves. And even when she's kind of having her talks with Sansa, at times she gives very good advice to Sansa, where women in this world are very limited to what they can do. They're never going to be given the seat of power at this point of the story. And the way you rule is kind of through your husbands. And we've seen that a lot. There have been some very influential women throughout the story. Whether you look at again, I've already said her name in this video, but Alysanne is one of the major points of that, of having some power over the kingdoms through their husband. Even if you look at Catelyn, right? Catelyn has a decent amount of power through Ned. She's able to say things and get Ned to maybe come through on them. For instance, Jon is pushed away from Winterfell because of Catelyn. And there's a lot of ways that Cersei does try and teach Sansa certain things that do have some wisdom to them. And I think the problem that we look at with Cersei when it comes to like things like arming the Faith Militant, stupid decision, very stupid decision, especially when you look at it of the idea of, I'm going to arm this religious cult that caused even the Targaryens with dragons problems. And you look at it from the point of view of, oh, you're doing this so you can get Marjorie imprisoned and also to get like blessings on Tommen. It's one of those weird situations where usually Cersei is actually very quick to violence. She doesn't care about doing things. This is one of those moments where Cersei, if she wanted the blessing on Tommen, should have asserted her power, right? Because even the Tyrells would be like, you're not going to give him your blessing, and then the Tyrells would back you as well. And then, but instead what she does is she basically arms the religion, who Cersei herself has to realize she doesn't have the greatest reputation. She has a rumor floating around that she's had incest with her brother and that her 3 children are all bastards. Did she just... There are decisions that Cersei makes that I'm like, I understand where in her mind she was coming from, because she viewed this as, oh, I'm getting the Faith Militant and the High Sparrow as allies, and they're basically going to be my subordinates and my little personal army. It's like the same idea of like Tyrion with the Mountain Clans. That's kind of how she saw the situation working out. But again, that blows up in her face, because she underestimates people and thinks she's smarter than everyone. And the High Sparrow outsmarts her. To me, it's that interesting idea that Cersei she is not able to rationally think about things when she's emotional. For instance, when we look at Joffrey's death, I think Tyrion, it makes sense why initially everybody would think Tyrion did it. And for Cersei, I think it does make sense as to why she would think it's Tyrion. But when you rationally like look at it and think about Tyrion as a person, why would Tyrion do poison/kill Joffrey in such an obvious way that it's him? Tyrion is too clever. He's too smart. If he was going to kill Joffrey, that's not the way he would have done it. And I think even Tywin knew that. But Cersei is blinded by her hatred of Tyrion that she can't really see through that. And again, there are like evidence to suggest why Cersei would maybe think it is Tyrion, because again, we talk about the whole scene with the whole where your joy will turn to ashes in your mouth, that whole idea. And again, you could cite that as evidence as to why Tyrion would do it. And you also look at Tyrion and Joffrey didn't have a great relationship, but Tyrion just isn't stupid. And Cersei is in this moment. Cersei should have known this wasn't Tyrion, as much as he hated Tyrion. And maybe Cersei, in her own mind, didn't care. Maybe she just wanted Tyrion to be killed. That's always possible as well. But even in her POV chatters, we know she thinks it's Tyrion. Like, she definitely thinks it's Tyrion. She doesn't think it's anyone else. Maybe she thought maybe the Tyrells helped. But why is that the conclusion she came to? Again, it just shows that she's smart, but she's stupid. Because she is right that the Tyrells are doing some treason against the crown. They were allegedly, it's not confirmed, but I feel like it's pretty confirmed at this point, that the Tyrells were involved in Joffrey's murder, or at least some other treachery with Tyrion, per se. And to me, you look at Cersei as a character, and I think just to wrap up this video, she is someone that's very hard to judge. Because if you gave her like an IQ test, like, you know, with today's standards and stuff, I think she would have above average intelligence. But I think her emotional intelligence is not very good. I think the way she views herself and the way she was, I guess, traumatized by the prophecy when she was younger has kind of blurred that she at times is very stupid. She makes very stupid decisions. So let me know at the end of this video if you guys were going to give Cersei a 1 being the lowest IQ to 10 being the highest. Where would you put Cersei on that scale? I mean, for me, I'd probably put her around a 6 or a 7. I think she has her moments and she has her bad moments. I don't think she's, the worst, stupidest character ever, but she's definitely not the smartest either. So thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.